It looks like brownie batter.
It sure doesn't smell like brownie batter. Hi, it's Steph, and welcome back to my late winter, early spring office, my basement. It is still too cold most days to be out in the garden, but there's still plenty to get done inside in preparation for the season. So today I am going to pot up the seedlings that we started together a little over a month ago now. It's been about 6 weeks and they are ready to move on to larger pots. We're going to also do the first fertilizing of the seedlings. I ended up ordering some additional seeds after we last met and seed started so that I could grow some additional cut flowers and experiment with flower arranging in my cut flower garden this summer. And I'm going to invite you to join me on a Gomphrena grow along. Here are the additional seeds that I picked up from Baker Creek to grow as cut flowers this season. I went ahead and picked up 3 varieties of stock. Now, stock is new to me this year. I have never grown it before, but what got me interested in it was the fact that it's said to have a really wonderful fragrance. And I'm trying to add things that are also fragrant into my cut flower arrangements. Now, when it comes to stock, I've come to learn that there are varieties that are single stem or single flowering sprays. And that is, you start one seed, you get one stalk of flowers, and then the plant is done. And there are also branching varieties. Knowing what I know now, if I grow this again next year, I'm going to go for the branching varieties. As a home gardener with limited space, I'm limited to just my raised garden beds. And for that reason, I would prefer to grow a flower that is cut and come again or multi-branching so that I get the most bang for my buck out of one plant. But with that said, I did go ahead and pick these 3 varieties that are single stem and they're really beautiful. So we're going to give these a try this year. And they are the Murasaki no Uta. It is a really beautiful purple stalk. I also selected this variety, which is Chanter Cedo Apricot, for obvious reasons. That apricot is just so gorgeous with this really soft color that I think will arrange really pretty with different color flowers that I'm growing. And this stock variety called Chanter Alto Red. Now, while it's called red, and I don't typically go for warm colors in my garden, it actually looks more like a fuchsia, deep fuchsia pink, and I also thought it was really pretty. So those are the 3 varieties of stock. I also picked up a celosia, and this celosia is called Rainbow Sherbet, and I picked this for its really plumy, fuzzy texture that I think will play really nicely in an arrangement with things like zinnias and cosmos and even dahlias later in the season. And this variety looks like it has really pretty sherbet colors in shades of pink and apricot, like a salmon peachy color, as well as like a whitish lime green color. So really pretty mix. And another warm colored flower that I don't normally pick, yellow, but what I really liked about this was its interesting shape. Now, I grow lots of alliums in my garden. I really love that round sphere pom-pom on top of a long stem, and that's what drew me to this flower. It is called the Crespedia, and it is a yellow drumstick. I just thought it was really interesting and will probably coordinate really nicely with things like the Sahara Rudbeckia, and even the yellow would probably look really nice with like shades of pink and even white feverfew that has a little bit of a yellow center. So I thought this was a cool one to try. It gets to be about 2 to 2.5 feet tall with long stiff stems, perfect for arranging. So we're going to give that one a try this year. And some basil. Now, I've grown basil for culinary purposes before, but I'm growing this one solely as a filler for arranging. And I got this idea from Stefi at Grown in New England. Stefi had mentioned that she grows a lot of cut flowers, that she also grows basil as a filler to provide a nice aroma in her flower arranging. So I thought that was a great idea. And so I'm going to go ahead and grow this variety, which is called Basil Cardinal. And in general, when you're growing basil for culinary purposes, you want to keep cutting on it to keep it nice and bushy and to keep the plant tasting fresh, because if you let it go to seed, your plant will then stop producing. It'll get very bitter, and then that's it. But basil that I'm growing for a filler in cut flower arrangements, I'm actually going to let go to flower because this is why I'm growing it. It has this really pretty, like antique purple look to the flower. So I'm excited to give this a try as a filler for cut flower arranging. And the last 2 varieties are some Scabiosa, which I actually just took out of the freezer because when I read the instructions on growing these, I read that they could benefit from a period of cold stratification. So I went ahead and popped them in the freezer as soon as they came in the mail, and I am now ready to sow them. And the varieties that I picked up was Scabiosa Summer Fruits, which is a really pretty mix of like berry colors. And I also picked up Scabiosa Paper Moon. And this one I'm solely growing for the seed heads. Once the flower is done blooming, you get this really pretty papery look to them with, it's again a ball shaped or sphere type bloom head. So I think this again will look really pretty in arrangement. All right, so now I actually have to go on to my trays, my burpee trays, start potting up all of the seedlings that I currently started. And once those are potted up, I will have some trays available to start some additional seeds. I'm gonna go ahead and start the Scabiosa. I did already start all of these, but I have to start the Scabiosa today, but I needed some more space. So let's go ahead and get our seedlings all potted up. Because this is the first time that I've grown seedlings inside in about 7 years or so, there was a few things that I needed to buy this year. And I got some grow lights. I picked up those burpee trays, which I've initially started my seedlings in, and now they're ready to be potted up. So I had to go ahead and determine what size pots I needed to pot up my seedlings. Now in the past, I have just used plastic cups, which I can show you. Here they are. These are just 9-ounce plastic cups that I had drilled some holes in the bottom for drainage, and I even used just painter's tape for labels. I grew some zinnias, some cosmos, and even some sunflowers in these last year, but I grew them outside on my patio walls once the weather warmed up, so at some point in mid-May, and it worked really well. But after about 3 weeks or so, these became kind of root bound, and then the seedlings were ready to be planted out in the landscape. Now, because I started seeds inside, I'm going to need a little bit more time in the pots before they can be planted out in the garden. So for that reason, I needed something that was a little bit bigger. So I am still going to use these this year. I'm going to reuse them for my stock that I'm growing. I'm going to put one in each one of the cups. So I just washed them this week. They're actually still dripping water, but these are ready to be reused. So these here that I chose, I actually had to do a little bit of research because I only have 3 shelves on my grow shelf that have grow lights. I wanted to maximize my space. So I was trying to figure out how many pots I can get in a 10-20 tray. And it turns out that you can get 18 of these 3x3 pots in a 10-20 tray. So I went ahead and I ordered a few sets of these. They're a nice thick plastic. They seem like they're going to be durable. So that's what I wanted. I want to invest in something that I'll have for a few years. And so I went with these pots, and I can link these down in the description of the video as well as in the pinned comment if this is something that you're also looking for. So I went ahead, they were on sale that day, and I ordered 4 packs of 60. They come in a box of 60, and they also come in a pack of 120. So I ordered 4 boxes of 60, so I should have plenty. And I also purchased some 10-20 trays. And they come in a box just like this in a few stacks. So now I have plenty of pots to pot up all of these seedlings. So let me get to work. As I'm filling my pots up with soil, I thought that I would just mention one thing. When most people initially start seeds, they'll use a seed starting mix, which is great because it's light and fluffy and helps seeds germinate really easily. But by the point you're ready to transplant them into your pots, you're going to now use potting mix because it has more nutrients to keep your seedlings growing. My favorite is the Coast of Maine potting soil, and I like it because it's nice and fluffy, has good ingredients, and doesn't have a lot of that filler like those twigs and sticks. So I'm going to go ahead and finish filling up my pots with soil. Check out these strawberry blonde marigolds. Marigolds have crazy roots, so they were screaming to get out of these little cells here. But look at this. They're even starting to put on some buds. Can you see that? So I'm going to pinch these off because I don't want this seedling to start blooming yet. So I'm going to go ahead and split these out and put them in the larger pots. If you're new to growing seeds or you haven't grown them in a long time like myself, I haven't grown seeds inside for at least 7 years. I usually grow them using the winter sowing method, which bypasses a lot of this having to pot up and fertilizing and so forth. Because once I set up those containers, Mother Nature is doing her job and taking care of growing those seeds for me. So now that I'm growing them inside, there were a couple of things that I had to brush up on. And one of those was, when is the right time for me to start potting up these seedlings into larger pots? And the answer to that is about 4 to 6 weeks in, or when the roots start showing through the bottom of your seed starting cells, or after they have 2 to 3 sets of true leaves. Now, the true leaves are the leaves that come after the seedling has initially sprouted. So first you have your seed, it'll sprout, it'll send up a couple of leaves, and those are the cotyledons. And those cotyledons are just the seedling leaves. They're not the true leaves. So once your seedling starts putting out its first, second, and third set of true leaves, then you know it is time to start potting up those seedlings, because now they're putting on significant growth. So for me, I'm about 6 weeks in from starting my seeds, and now is a good time for me to pot them up. You saw earlier when I showed you my marigolds that the roots were really coming out the bottom, and that is a surefire sign that that seedling has now outgrown that growing tray and it needs to be potted up so that it has more room in a bigger pot with more soil to continue its root development and its top growth. So that is a couple of things that I just wanted to touch on. And in terms of the fertilizing, another question that often comes up and that I was also curious about is, when do you start fertilizing your seedlings? And the answer to that is usually around the time, again, that your seedlings have 2 to 3 sets of true leaves. At that point, you can start fertilizing. The important thing to note about fertilizing is that you have to make sure that you don't over fertilize. And what that means is, whatever fertilizer you use, you're going to dilute it to a half strength. So if you have a 1 gallon watering can and the size of fertilizing says 1 tablespoon per 1 gallon, you're going to only do a half a tablespoon for that 1 gallon. So I was trying to decide which fertilizer I was going to use. I really love the Alaska fish fertilizer, but as you can imagine, the problem with that is that it's pretty pungent, and I was worried about using it inside. But it is an organic fertilizer. It doesn't burn the seedlings, and I thought that it was going to be a good choice. So given that it's at half strength, it shouldn't be as stinky as it would be at full strength. So I am going to go ahead and use my Alaska fish fertilizer, but I did also order some Espoma fertilizer, the Grow fertilizer. And once that comes in, I will start using that inside to spare my family of a fishy, stinky basement. All right, so let's go ahead and move these trays to under the grow lights, and we will go ahead and water them in. This is how I'm going to fertilize my seedlings. I'm going to use my Alaska fish fertilizer until my Espoma Grow comes in. So this is what I'm using today, and it's a 511. It won't burn. It's for organic gardening. And in the back of the container, it does give you the measurement, and it says that you're supposed to use 2 tablespoons for 1 gallon of water. And because these are seedlings, we are going to fertilize them at half strength, which means I'm only going to use 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. So I have this spoon here that I use just for fertilizers, and it is a 1 tablespoon measurement. And I have this container here which measures 1 gallon of water. So I'm going to go ahead and take 1 tablespoon of my Alaska fish fertilizer and mix it into this 1 gallon of water, and then I will pour it into my watering can. That is so I know the correct measurement is going into my watering can.
It looks like brownie batter.
It sure doesn't smell like brownie batter. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and mix that in. And now I'm going to go ahead and water my seedlings. And it's always important to bottom water, because then the seedlings will just soak up the water with their roots. If you water from above, you're going to get moisture sitting on the top of your soil, which can start growing mold and leads to breeding of fungus gnats. And you'll just let your seedlings sit in there and they'll sop up all of this extra water. I'm planning on fertilizing my seedlings once a week on Fridays. It's just easier for me to remember Fertilizer Friday. When growing seedlings indoors, there are two things that you very quickly can run out of. One of those is space. When growing seedlings in trays like this or seed starting cells, it's important to think ahead and account for grow shelf space as well as grow light space, because it's very easy to run out of space when you go from a small little cell like this to a larger pot. So that's an important consideration, as well as how many plants can you actually fit into the garden space that you're looking to plant. So space is a big one. And number two is how much soil you need. I've actually run out of potting soil again. So I had planned on finishing that tray and another one, but I'm going to have to pick up some more potting soil to finish up potting the rest of my seedlings. But for now, I did reserve enough to get this scabiosa started and some Gomphrena. So let's work on that. If you've been around my channel for a while, you know that I absolutely love an annual called Gomphrena. And in 2022, I grew a variety called Atomic Purple, which is this one here by Baker Creek. And I grew it in my main walkway border, and it was absolutely beautiful. And then last year in 2023, I grew a variety called Snow White. And having grown the purple and the white, I much prefer the purple. Because our walkway is set so far from the street, I don't feel like the white was as impactful or as eye-catching as the Atomic Purple. So for this year, 2024, I am going back to the original Gomphrena that I fell in love with, which was the Atomic Purple Gomphrena. And I have had so many of you comment on how you are now trying to grow Gomphrena, or will be or have been growing it, because you have seen mine and really liked it. So I want to invite you to go ahead and grow your Gomphrena along with me this season. If you are just trying it for the first time, I'm going to give you some tips that has helped me grow this particular annual. It's really easy, I find, and I've grown it in a couple of different ways. Now, we are here in Massachusetts in zone 6, about 6 weeks away from our last frost date. Now, we are slated to have a last frost around May 5th, but I've been gardening for a long time and long enough to know that that is not always accurate. I have planted things before after my last frost date, only to get hit with a freak frost and lose some of my seedlings. So I usually wait about a week or two after my last frost date to actually plant anything out. But because I am growing seedlings indoor this year, I thought that I would start these 6 weeks out from my last frost date and get them started a little bit earlier. Now, in the past, I have grown them with the winter sowing method, which works beautifully. I've also direct sown them, and I started some in some trays like this right outside on my patio wall once the weather warmed up last season. So all three ways have worked really well. The key thing that you need to do when starting Gomphrena seeds is to soak the seeds. So the first year when I grew this Atomic Purple variety, I direct sowed them right in my front walkway. What I did was I followed the instructions. I soaked the seeds in a little glass bowl like this with some water overnight, so for 24 hours. And then I went out there and I poked a seed about every 8 inches or so, all the way up my walkway. And I had almost all of them germinate, with the exception of a couple. So they worked out really well with a direct sow. Now, these will not start growing and doing really well until it heats up. So Gomphrena likes the warmth. So if you don't see anything happening for a little while, it's because it's not hot enough for them yet. So however you decide that you want to grow your Gomphrena, the important thing to do is just make sure that you soak your seeds. You do not have to soak your seeds, however, if you are going to grow them using the winter sowing method. Because you're going to pre-moisten the soil that you're putting in your winter sowing container, you will not need to soak your seeds because they're already going to be sitting in that soil that's a little moist, which will help break down the outer shell and help your seeds germinate. But they will also only germinate once it starts warming up outside. So those are a few things to note. So I am going to go ahead and start my Gomphrena today. I can't start the ones in the tray because this is sealed, so I do need to soak them. So I'm going to put them in some water and let them soak overnight, and I will start my seeds tomorrow. But I will start a container of winter sowing today with you. So if you want to go ahead and grow your Gomphrena along with me, I will provide periodic updates both in videos and on the community tab of my channel, and we can try growing some beautiful Gomphrena this year together. If you would also like to try your Gomphrena using the winter sowing method and you're not sure how to winter sow, I do have a whole playlist on my channel, and I also have a 5-minute quick start guide that you can watch so you can see how to get started with some winter sowing. Now, it is March and we're currently in spring, but you can still winter sow because what you're doing is just creating a little greenhouse that you're going to start your seeds in outside. I'm going to start the Scabiosa Summer Fruits. These are pretty good sized seeds. And the directions say to sow them about a 1/4 inch deep. So I went ahead and used my trusty chopstick and I poked a hole. And now I'm just going to drop a seed in each one. And I'm starting 2 in each cell, just to make sure that I get at least 1 per cell. All right, I've already labeled my tape. And next I'm going to start the Scabiosa Paper Moon in this row here. These seeds have a really cool shape. They're nice and big, so easy to handle. I love seeds that are big like this. Well, that is it for today's video. I'm glad to have gotten most of my seedlings potted up. I do have to pick up some more potting soil and then I can get the rest of them potted. I was happy to see that those pots that I bought actually came with plant labels, which is great because you can never have enough plant labels. They got their first feed with some fertilizer, so now I'm just waiting on my Espoma Grow fertilizer to come in and I'll start using that next Friday. And the Gomphrena is soaking, and tomorrow I will get this tray planted up and under the grow lights. So let me know, have you started to pot up your seedlings? How's your indoor seed starting going? And do you fertilize your seedlings? If you do, how often and what do you like to use? Leave it in the comments below so we can learn from each other. And tell me, are you planning on growing any Gomphrena this season? Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.